Writing Command Center for the special Halloween podcast episode Spooky Season Part 1.
Hey, oh boy. Hey, welcome to the PGH Writing Command Center. And I am Paul John Hausleben of God Bless the Cake Publishing. And you just heard it by Mr. Monster voice, Mr. Monster. And welcome to the special Halloween podcast episode, Spooky Season number 1. Yeah, we are here. And thanks to background music for video, for the cool intro music, the Halloween little ditty there. It's really cool. So thank you to them. Check them out on Pixabay. Make a donation. They do a great job there, and we really appreciate that. Paulie's already dropped a few baubles in the sporin for them, so that's really cool. So support independent artists. That's what God Bless the Cake Publishing tries to do here. So any rate, we are thrilled you're here, and I am Paul John Hausleben of God Bless the Cake Publishing LLC, and I'm the flagship author, chief photographer, music reviewer, music critic, chief cook, bottle washer, do everything guy here at God Bless the Cake Publishing LLC with a little help from my friends. And my friends are gathered here in the corner, and there's pumpkins flickering with candles, and there's ghosts, and there's things that go bump in the night, and we got some candles going, and there's a witch in the corner stirring a concoction with bones and different, legs of newts. No, I made that all up. At any rate, we're thrilled you're here. If you are a longtime listener, welcome back. If you are a new listener, first-time listener, then welcome. And you're going to tune in to where Paulie is going to tell real-life stories of the unexplained. Yes, I hesitate to call them ghost stories. I don't know. I just got to leave it as stories of the unexplained. And there's a disclaimer here. Paulie is, how shall I say, I'm not a believer, and I'm not an unbeliever. I just don't have any explanation for what these stories are about. And in a couple instances of these stories, I was a main participant and witnessed it. And I still don't have any explanation. And because I'm logical and factual, Paulie, I'm going to leave them as stories of the unexplained. So there we go, folks. And we'll try to fit in as many stories as we can. That's why we decided to go with part 1 and potentially part 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. We'll get through them. But I have a tendency to get off in the weeds and then come on back to the main road. So here we go. So before we get too deep into this podcast and start telling the spooky stories, let me rattle papers in the background for dramatic effect, because I got a lot. I do have some notes. I usually do a lot from the stream of consciousness, but today I had to have some notes because some of the locations I'm going to mention there, I didn't get the names quite correct. Anyway, get your little Orphan Annie decoder pins out. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Corporate Facilities Group Incorporated, the leader in technical consulting, facilities maintenance, facilities management, and operations, as well as property maintenance and management services throughout America. And now, CFG Incorporated is proud to announce a new department, a new initiative headed up by the amazing Mr. Steve McMillan. And let's give it up for old Steve Aruski, great guy. Steve brings his many years of experience as he manages pre-construction services and estimating for residential development, residential renovations, and light commercial projects for CFG Incorporated. So, before you spend big bucks on a project, send the scope, the price, all the information to old Steve Aruski and let him check it out. Make sure your hard-earned money is going in exactly the right place and you're not getting schnookered. Don't get schnookered. And tell them Paulie sent you. At any rate, check them out on the web at www.corporatefacilitiesgroup1.com. That's www.corporatefacilitiesgroup1.com. And we would like to thank Lydia, Steve Aruski, and Liliana and Summer and the kitty cat. I can't remember the kitty cat's name for proudly sponsoring this podcast. Smokey. I think it's Smokey. Yeah, hey, Smokey. All right, shout out to Smokey. And a shout out to my friend Kim Kramer, who celebrates a birthday on Halloween. How about that? That's super cool. That is super cool. So we'll all cheer for Kim. Happy birthday, Kim. And I hope you enjoy your spooky season birthday this year. And if you would like to sponsor the podcast, just send email to old God Bless the Cake Publishing at gmail.com. Go to God Bless the Cake Publishing at gmail.com. Send us your info and we'll work a deal. I'm Paulie. We're going to work a deal here. So I also would like to mention a couple special events coming up. November 11th, Veterans Day. Oh my goodness, yay! Yay for the veterans. And back in my old stomping grounds, North Haledon, New Jersey, American Legion Post number 428 at 512 High Mountain Road in North Haledon, New Jersey at 11 o'clock at the Legion Post. They are having a special ceremony for Veterans Day, honoring veterans. And that'll be an outstanding event. For information, you can call 973-650-7499. Check it out, 512 High Mountain Road in North Haledon, New Jersey, 07508. And the New Jersey Vietnam Veterans Memorial and Museum in Homedale, New Jersey. Check them out. They're also having some special events, and appreciate any donations. You can check them out at www.njvvmf.org. So thanks to those folks that send in those announcements for charities, goodwill, special events, not-for-profits only, please. And Paulie, you'll be sure to fit them in on the old podcast here. So let's get to the meat and potatoes. And as I mentioned, these are stories of the unexplained. So turn the lights down, put the pumpkin guy on, put the candle in there, and get your favorite beverage, maybe a hot mulled cider or something. I guess that's more Christmas, but just pour a shot of whiskey. Paulie's lived all over the place. And people say I lived 1,000 lives. That's what the book Experience is all about. And maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I want to come back as a tree. I'm just going to stand there and observe things. I got worn out in this life. Well, one of the places I lived was in upstate New York. And if I spin the big prize wheel and it goes around and around, I have to admit, my beloved New Jersey, of course. But I think upstate New York might be my second favorite place I've ever lived. Maybe even my favorite place. I lived in Saratoga County. Upstate New York, and worked all over taking care of properties. And my primary source of income all these years has been taking care of buildings, all types of buildings. Paulie's taking care of corporate headquarters, hospitals, medical offices, small schools, big schools, college universities, warehouses, manufacturing plants, production pick and pack warehouses. You name it, Paulie's done it. I've been in all these buildings, old buildings, new buildings, in between buildings, tall buildings, short buildings, critical data centers. And the one thing I've noticed in my career is obviously the cast of characters and people that you meet as you go along, but also that buildings have energy. And some buildings I could tell, and maybe it's because I've been doing this for, I'm going to put XXX amount of years, because people will know how old I am, although they probably know how old I am now. I'm very old, and I get older every day. This world is wearing me out, but I took care of all these buildings, and they have energy. And some buildings have negative energy. When you walk in, it's like, this is a bad building. Something's really wrong here, be it HVAC or plumbing or whatever. And some buildings are super positive. I walk in, I'm like, oh, this is a good building. This is going to be a good building. So I guess that's just me and my intuition or experience of doing this for all these years. And I do building inspections, so walk around the buildings and get into the weeds in the back of the house and the front of the house and go on the roof and get into the mechanicals and the plumbing. So I know buildings and I feel things right away. So I'm in upstate New York and I'm working for a not for profit agency. And I just took this job. It was September. I remember because the kiddies were just going back into school and colleges were just getting going and summer was over and all that stuff. And upstate New York is lovely. I mean, it is the most beautiful place in the fall of the year. I love New Hampshire, lived there too, and Vermont. Connecticut, all New England has that tapestry of beautiful leaves with the red maples and the swamp maples. So you get those beautiful crimson reds. But I think upstate New York is so much different than downstate. And people think it's just New York City, and it's not. In Long Island, you got to go upstate New York. So I just took this job, and it was headquartered in Albany, but I covered the whole area, all the way down the Hudson Valley, over to the border with Vermont, up to Schoharie County, and was thinking about Cooperstown, that area, western New York, and all over. We were based in Albany, and right across from Albany, I think the highway is 787, and then you got the Hudson Rivers there. You know, the upper parts of the Hudson. You come up through Port Albany, and it gets a little skinnier up there. And I can remember in the winter the Coast Guard coming up with the icebreakers, breaking up the ice there. And I think you can go all the way to Cohoes, where the waterfalls are. And then you can't really navigate it too much anymore. But had an office in Cohoes, and we were right there on 787. And I just took the job, and there was this guy, and we're going to call him Pete. Let's call him Pete. And Pete was sort of like a placeholder guy until I started the job. They hired me, but I couldn't start for about a month. So Pete was holding the fort. He was a friend of one of the board of directors on a not-for-profit. And this agency, it provided services for disabled folks, residential housing, commercial, medical, therapies, all kinds of great things for disabled people. Wonderful mission, wonderful agency. And Pete's holding the fort there, you know, and Pete was an architect. I thought he was an engineer, but now as I looked through my notes and spun stuff, he was an architect. So he knew about buildings, and a lot of what the agency did with the residential portfolios was they bought older houses, but there's a lot of history up there. Albany is, if not the oldest, one of the oldest cities in America. I think it's 1687. Henry Hudson came up with the half moon and all that stuff. And Troy is right across there, and Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute. It's a small city, but it's got a lot of history there. And Pete lived in Troy, and he was holding down the fort, doing historic renovations on some of these projects on these houses that the agency wanted to fix up and get disabled folks to live in. And he knew a lot about buildings, of course. He might not have known the maintenance procedures and nuts and bolts or individual trades real good, but because he's an architect, he was able to kind of run the show and keep the maintenance guys going and keep the facility operations going until Paulie showed up. And then I showed up, and I met him, and we sat and had coffee. A nice guy, great guy. And I was only a few days at the agency, and he come over and he says, "Hey, Paulie, you know, I'd love to go over some of these projects we're working on." He said, "I know you're really jammed for time. You just got here and everything." He says, "Yeah, I live right across the river there in Troy, so you can come over." He says, "Why don't we grab a couple 6-packs of beer and you come over to my house after work? And I've got a whole home office there, and I have a drafting table, and I have all this computer files and blueprints and everything, and I'll go over the priority projects before I beg out of here and hand it all over to you." And I said, "Hey, that sounds great, Pete. Yeah, I would love that. I'd love to have a couple beers with you and learn." So we picked a day that I was able to quit a little bit early, and he gave me the address. And I tooled on over there to Troy, an old city, and it was really cool. I really liked it. And I got into this neighborhood, and I'm cruising around following the GPS trying to find a house, and they were all old homes, beautiful, big lawns in the front, big lawns in the back, and they were the kind of, they're not mansions, but they're big, older homes. I don't know, colonials maybe you would call them. But so I'm touring around, and I get to Pete's Street, and one of the first things I notice is on the end of the street is a cemetery, like right there, and it's got, oh, it's like a classic type entrance to this cemetery, and it's got the concrete pillars with the scary iron gates swinging in the front, and I looked it up because let me rattle my notes for dramatic effect. It's Oakwood Cemetery because it goes by a couple of different names. And I finally narrowed it down, and they have all these spooky ghost stories about it, and there's supposedly headless statues of angels that vandals have broken the heads off and over the years, or they've just crumbled from age. It's very old, back to the 1800s. And the statues bleed in sorrow type stuff, all kinds of stuff. You can go on the big internet search machine and check it out. So Pete's house is kind of sort of right around the corner from this place, and I pull up in the driveway, and it's a beautiful house. Now, this house is pretty much fully restored from, I would say it's probably from like the turn of the century, around the 1910, 1900, somewhere in there, just going by the architecture. And it's one of those wood frame houses with a big giant wraparound porch, and it has the portico in the front and the portico on the side, which was probably going back to like the carriage days with the horses. And big piece of property, big trees in the front, and it had that steeple guy that came up, in the top with the weather vane guy on the top, and that's where the witches would fly around, right? And it had shutters, and the shutters would be flapping in the breeze and the wind on Halloween night with a pumpkin on the porch. But this house was not run down. It was not at all. It was all painted white, and I could tell that Pete must have done a lot of work on it, as expected. He's an architect, and it had a quarters, like a maid's quarters or a caretaker's quarters out in the back. Fantastic house. I did quickly determine that Pete made a lot of money. I imagine this house costs a few bucks. So I'm sitting in the driveway. I picked up my 6-pack of beer, and I was early. Paulie's always early. And a few minutes later, here comes Pete. He had a pickup truck, and he tools into the driveway, parks behind me. He says, "Oh, sorry, I'm late. I picked up 2 6-packs. So now we got 3 6-packs. So now we have a goal to meet." So Pete's like, "Come on in, Paulie. We'll crack open a couple of these cold ones, and I'll show you what we're working on." And we were working on a historic. It was a porch. We were emulating some moldings in. Oh goodness gracious, Paul! Don't Colony. It was in Colony, New York, right down the road. And so he says, "I want to show you the molding cuts that I got back from the woodworker to duplicate the original moldings." So it had a big oak doors in the front. There's big round oak doors with the kind of like not stained glass, but the glass you can't see through, And it had the little leaded glass things going around. And he puts the key in the door and he opens it up, and there's a big long foyer with a beautiful chestnut wood staircase to your left, which brought you up to the upper reaches. And then a long hallway with a beautiful chandelier, and I could see the kitchen was like down that hallway because I could see the cupboards and such. And then to the right side was a living room, and then we walked down the hallway a little bit, and there's for lack of a better word, I'm going to call it a sitting room or a library. And it had some chairs and a small sofa in there, and it was all bookcases on the one wall. And I remember it had a piano. I guess Pete played the piano, and it was over in the corner there. It's beautiful, beautiful little tapestry carpet. But the odd thing was, because Pete puts his beers down, and he's like, "Ah, man, I can't believe this. I can't believe she did this." And I stopped, and I was like, did what? And I look in I'm going to call it the library, and the bookshelves don't have many books on it because the books are all over the floor. There's books tossed all over the floor in this room. And Pete's like cussing and swearing and he's stomping and he's like, I'm so sorry, Paulie. She acts up like this. And he keeps using a pronoun she. So I was like, he doesn't have a wedding ring. I don't see signs of somebody else in the house. I don't see toys or stuff that would indicate kidlers. And I would say Pete was maybe 55, between 55 and 60. But this guy, he was a good looking guy. I mean, you would take him to be 40. He was tall, lean, but he had muscles because he was in the gym all the time, and he had this beautiful dark hair and the chiseled feature. He's like a Hollywood movie star guy, really. I mean, the women just faint at this guy when he would walk through the halls of the agency. Very handsome guy. So I said, well, I'll help you pick him up. Pete, I said, do they go in any particular order? And he's like, no, just stuff them in the shelves and we'll make piles. I'll get back to it later and organize it. So I didn't really want to ask him too much because he wasn't really volunteering. I could tell he was very angry. And he was an easygoing guy. And I would take care of the books, and I happened to look down the hallway to the kitchen. And I look on the floor in the kitchen, and there's broken plates, and there's knives and spoons, and there's coffee cups and broken glass and all kinds of stuff. And the cupboards are open in the kitchen. I could see into the kitchen. I was like, did you have an earthquake here or something, Pete? I said, your kitchen too. I said, there's stuff all over the broken stuff all over the floor in your kitchen. He says, man, really, Paulie? I was like, yeah. I said, what's going on? He says, yeah, it's not an earthquake. He says, I have a poltergeist. I said, a poltergeist? He said, yeah, there's a ghost. There's a poltergeist in this house. She appeared shortly after I moved in. And she gets angry at me from time to time and acts up and does this stuff. I said, she tosses your stuff all over the place? He says, yeah. And she makes noises and bangs doors in the middle of the night if I'm not paying attention to her. She likes me to talk to her. I said, it's okay. I mean, I just met this guy. He seemed like a professional guy. I mean, he makes all this money, had a fancy pickup truck, this big house. He's an architect. I was like, okay. So we go to the kitchen. He gets a broom, and I'm helping him pick stuff up in the kitchen. And I said, well, how do you know she's a she? He said, oh. He said, you seem like a straight-up guy, Paulie. He says, I'm going to tell you, I have a lot of girlfriends, and most of them are young. I said, oh. He says, I'm single. I've been divorced since I was a young man. Only was married for a couple of years. It didn't work out. So I've been single for all these years, and I meet these young ladies, and I like to bring them over and entertain them. I was like, oh, okay, I ain't judging, whatever. He's a good-looking guy. He get any girl he want, any woman. So I was like, oh, okay, we're cleaning up the kitchen. He says, so last night I had this young lady over here, and she spent the night with me, and the reason I know she got angry. You see, she gets jealous. She's a woman ghost, and she gets jealous when I bring other women here. And this is true, folks. I experienced this, Pete. So I said, well, I don't judge it. It's good for you, man. And I started to, I was like, well, I'm going to crack a beer open because I need to soften this situation up a little bit. And he says, sometimes when the gals stay over, we're in bed in the middle of the night together and the noises start. And then when we wake up, she's gone, like the ghost is gone in the bathroom and taken the woman's, like her underwear and her brasiers and all her personal effects, her cosmetics and everything, tossed them all over the bathroom. He says, we don't see her. Sometimes it's just a little mist in the air. And then she acts up. I have no reason not to believe him. I mean, we walked in the house and it was tossed all over the place. He's telling me these stories and he seemed very sincere and it didn't seem like it bothered him. So I had to ask the question. I said, what do the young ladies think? He said, oh, most of them run out and they don't want to spend the night anymore. I have to come over to their place. Well, that seems like a reasonable solution to me. So we went over the project and everything, and worked with Pete for a couple more weeks and didn't go back over to that house though. And I didn't experience anything while we were there, but I'm a man, so maybe the ghost lady liked me. I don't know. And any rate, about a year later or so, I was working on a bunch of projects and historic things, and I had to hit up Pete for some advice and some questions about something he did. And we were email back and forth, and then he called me. He just called me. He says, I moved out of the house in Troy. I was like, no surprise on that. The poor people bought it. And he said, in New York, you got to disclose if you got ghosts, but in the house. And I told him yes. I was like, oh, poltergeist, huh? Yeah, yeah. He says, it's right in the sales contract. I said, oh, He said, but the people, they haven't experienced anything because the ghost followed me. I live in Burlington, Vermont. And now she's up here in my new house. I was like, this is unbelievable. I said, what does she do there? He said, pretty much the same stuff. She gets mad and throws stuff all over my house. It's like, well, Pete, maybe you ought to buy like plastic plates. So that's Pete and his poltergeist in Troy, New York. And Troy is one of the most haunted cities in America. Oof. So my next story comes from the disabled agency too. And I mentioned how they had residential homes where the disabled folks would live. And they were very nice. They give them a community residential setting to live in. They had their own bedrooms and TVs, and they'd entertain them with movie night. And it was just nice to have a nice residential setting to live in. And each house might have had, it depended on the size of the house, might have 10 residents, it might have 5, might have 8, whatever. And, as in normal life, people come and people go. So when I first got to the agency, I was touring around with a guy named Joe. We're going to call him Joe. And Joe was a longtime maintenance supervisor on the residential homes. And Joe was a nice guy, very nice, did a good job, decent technical knowledge, and he's showing me around and bringing me to each house. So we went to this house, and it was a bigger house. And I want to say it was in Guilderland, New York. I think it was in Guilderland. And this is all upstate New York. And we pull up to this house, and none of the residents were in the home during the day. This particular day, they would bring them to daycare. They would bring them to the main buildings down in Albany, and they do activities, music, and movies, and physical therapy, and exercise, and just all this stuff, just to get them out of the house. So the manager is usually a manager, a couple assistants, and assistant manager. And in this particular case, the nurse was there. They have nurses that would float around to each of the houses and check on the residents and if they were sick or monitor their medication, whatever. And this house had a huge living room, and on the perimeters of the living room were individual bedrooms. They weren't small bedrooms, they weren't large bedrooms, but the bedrooms, there might have been 6 or 7 bedrooms in a row. And then there were, for the more ambulatory folks, there were some bedrooms upstairs, bathrooms and such. So I was looking, Joe had described to me about this problem with an ongoing roof leak that they felt they had finally fixed. And it was a colonial house, very big, and it had a lot of different sections to the roof. So I went outside and I was checking where the repair was. I could see it from the ground. And Joe's inside shooting the breeze with the manager and the nurse. They're sitting at this big table, had a fireplace there, and a big screen TV, and they're talking, shooting the breeze. Joe known him for years, you see. And they're making their notes and everything, and I come back in. I'm looking at the ceiling in the kitchen. I said to Joe, it looks like the leak is not active. You just have to, put a little Kills on here and touch up that stain. And I walk back into the living room where they're talking, and Joe happens to mention, he says, hey, how's Annie doing? And the manager says, oh, Annie? He says, yeah, she used to be in that bedroom right there next to the fireplace at the end. He's and he points, and the manager's like, oh, I'm sorry, Joe. She said, Annie died about 6 months ago. And Joe's like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I haven't been out here in a while. My guys come out, but I didn't know she passed away. I'm sorry to hear that. She was a lovely old lady. And the manager manager's like, yeah, everybody loved Annie, but she's still here with us, so we don't feel too bad. And the nurse is just making notes and going through like prescriptions. She doesn't miss a beat. And Joe's like, what do you mean she's still here? And Joe was like a very meek and mellow guy. He's like Horace Wimp in the ELO song, The Diary of Horace Wimp. And he says, his voice starts to stand. What do you mean she's still here? And the manager says, well, every time we mention Annie, she makes an appearance and tells us how much she cares and how much she's watching over us and how much she loves us. And Joe's like, oh, okay. And I'm just standing there listening to this. And the nurse says, yeah, we were talking about Annie last week when the residents went out and the housekeeper came to clean and we made a grocery store run. And when we came back, the housekeeper's sitting on the front steps and she quit. She had her vacuum and her dusters and all her cleaning. She said, I'm never coming back to this house again. She said, the second you guys left, there was someone walking up and down the stairs, and then there was doors open and closed, and someone flushed the toilet upstairs, and there's nobody in this house. She says, I'm not coming back here. I'm done. Find a new housekeeper. So Joe's like, oh, So the nurse says, yeah, and when we mention her, we go in the office, and her file is pulled up out of the drawer, and it's just to let us know that she's still around. I'm kind of thinking they're pulling our legs here. So we're standing there, and the doors to the bedrooms are open. Not all the way, just some of them were open, I guess, to get air through the building. And they had those disabled levers. They didn't have round doorknobs because we're talking about disabled folks. They might be palsy victims or something. You can't get your hand around the doorknob. So they had levers. And as we're standing there, the door to the bedroom that Joe had pointed at slowly closes, and the lever handle goes down. The door closes into the closed position, and the lever comes back up, and you hear an audible click. Boom. And the nurse doesn't miss a beat, and the manager's like, oh, there, see, we told you. Annie just went in her bedroom. And Joe, he was like those guys in the cartoons where their eyes come out on the springs, And he's like, he's starting to freak out. And I was like, oh, come on, guys. I said, you probably got the window open and a little air came through. But I didn't have an explanation for why the lever went down and the lever went back up. So I said, somebody's in the room. So they're like, nobody's here. Nobody's here, Paul. So you're new to the agency. There's a lot of things that happen here. So now I'm big and bold and brave, and I go walking over there. I was like, somebody's in the bedroom. So I open the bedroom door, and I swing it open. I'm looking around. Dresser, some pictures on the wall, nice bed. The bed was made. It's a beautiful bedroom. Little chair. The problem is, there's nobody in the room. There's nobody in there. So Joe, he's like, Paulie, tell me there's somebody in that bedroom. So I look around, double check, kind of even look in the closet to see if somebody's playing a joke on us here. I was like, Joe, I hate to tell you this, there's nobody in the bedroom. That was it. Joe did a 360 right out the front door, goes running down the front steps, down down the walkway, and he's sitting in the maintenance truck, chain smoking cigarettes when I come out. He's like, I am never going back in that house ever again. Once more, and the manager and the nurse are like, hey, we tried to tell you, she doesn't hurt anything. She just still loves us. Now, I didn't feel any cold breezes. I didn't see any ghosts floating in the air. I didn't hear anything, but I have no explanation for that. I would like to say it was the wind and it blew the door, but I have no explanation of why the lever went down and the lever came back up. Ooh. My final story for today. We might have to have a part 3. I can't believe these stories. I've still got them on my list. So this goes back to when Paulie was at the world famous camera manufacturer, where I spent a lot of my career there. And I started there as an electrician and worked my way up to the facility maintenance. And eventually I was in charge of corporate security as well as facilities. And did a lot of corporate investigations and subterfuge and people with nefarious intentions. I actually got very good at the security part. Those are different stories. But at any rate, I was there for many, many years, and it was in New Jersey, right on the border in New York and New Jersey. And focusing on the security aspect, I had a team of security officers who reported to me. Some were direct employees of the company. Some, if I had extra buildings and I didn't have enough horsepower, I would go to contracted security. So we had a team because we had warehouses full of millions of dollars of cameras and parts and pieces, and we had the corporate headquarters. We had a warehouse of office equipment. We had a lot of responsibility there, and bad, nefarious intention folks would try to break in and steal stuff. And we had office buildings. It was a big, giant corporate complex type thing. And then we had buildings in other states. But at any rate, so I'm in charge of security here, and I have a team. And like any big corporation and company, you meet these people along the way, and I remember most of them. Some beautiful people work there. I love that job. And we had a guy, and I'm going to call him Mr. Leeds. And Mr. Leeds worked for the company for forever. I think he started when they were in Manhattan, when the company came in its infancy with cameras after World War II, with the Japanese cameras that the soldiers brought back and got established, and they saw the parent company in Japan saw an opportunity, and they came over to Manhattan to Camera Row there and started selling their cameras. And it just grew and grew and grew. So Mr. Leeds went back to the infancy of the company, and he probably worked there when I was there, maybe 30 years. And he was an older gentleman, very distinguished. He's the kind of guy that you would see on a commercial, like an English commercial. And he's sitting in the chair in the corner of the library, like Pete's library, but the books are still in the shelves. And he's sitting in a nice leather chair, smoking a pipe, having a dram of whiskey. Very distinguished. Always wore tweed jackets. Now, this is a day and age, because I'm old, where men wore business suits and ties to work every day. And the ladies, the women, they wore business attire, dresses, business pantsuits, that type of thing. And business attire meant a whole different definition back then. But Mr. Leeds always wore tweed jackets, and with a black tie. He always wore a black tie. Could be different color shirts. He would wear black or brown trousers or gray trousers with very polished shoes. And he was very distinguished. No facial hair, but white hair. He had a lot of hair, and he combed it over very nicely, very neat. Great guy, wonderful personality, always smiling, laughing, always telling jokes, and a very kind and gentle man. And I think he had something to do with camera trafficking. I think he trafficked the product, like shipping, receiving, that type of thing. And he had a office down what we called Secretary's Row. And when you walked in the lobby of the corporate headquarters, there were hallways that went all different ways. And the one hallway to the left had a sitting room, and then it had a conference room, and human resources was there, and the individual departments as you went down this long, long hallway. And these are the olden days. You had the secretaries, the assistants, in wooden oak desks with typing returns with the IBM typewriters on the return side of the desk. And I'd have to repair them. My team would always be fixing those typewriters. And one assistant after another for, I'm going to say at least 400 feet, maybe 500. I don't know. Long, long row, and offices on each side of the hallway. And then as you got down the hallway more, there were executive offices, and they had bigger offices. And that's where Mr. Leeds sat. He was an executive at this point. And his assistant was in the desk right outside his office. So, Mr. Leeds unfortunately passed away about 5 years after he retired. We had a big retirement ceremony, and then we got the word about 5 years after he retired that he passed away. And myself and a number of folks that worked with him for all those years went to the funeral. And I want to say it was over in Tenafly, New Jersey. And just a great guy. We felt sad that he had passed away and everything. So rewind to my security force. I had a guy that worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and he was a family guy. He was probably in his 40s. Great security officer, one of my best. And he just worked these part-time shift to make extra jingle for his family. And he lived in Orange County in New York, and his name was Marcus. Marcus was when Marcus was on duty Friday, Saturday, and Sunday tend to be trouble days, but I didn't worry. That's when people with nefarious intentions have extra time. Things would always happen on Friday and Saturday nights, and Japanese executives would have to come into work because of time shift, and they'd work very late at night and on weekends too. So I always felt good that Marcus was on duty during the weekends because he was top notch. His notes were always good. He did his rounds at the top of the hour. They would do these building rounds and tour the building and then have to fill out paperwork and punch these little clocks called DTEX Watchman clock. You have little key stations, and as you go around a building, you take the key and put it in the clock and punch the clock. And there's a tape inside to prove you're doing the rounds for insurance and for guys like me to make sure our security officers aren't just sleeping in the lobby. So Marcus was assigned to that corporate headquarters building, and there was a security station right in the lobby there. And like I said, I didn't worry when Marcus was on duty. So I get this call on the security hotlines about 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, and now it's Sunday morning. And I know Marcus is on duty, and I see it's the corporate line. I was like, uh-oh, trouble. And my phone, I didn't sleep very well back then. I don't sleep very well now, but my phone rang constantly with alarms in different places. The security part of the job really wear you out. So I pick up the phone. I was like, hey, Marcus, what's up? And he's like, Paulie. And Marcus he was a gentle giant. He was huge. He was like 6'6", 285 pounds. He looked like a linebacker. He was just a big, giant, gentle giant, but he was a big guy. A criminal probably wouldn't fare too well if they come through the door there with Marcus on duty. He'd stomp him. And he was always calm. A cool, collective guy. Steady Eddie. And he's screaming in the phone. He's like, Paulie, you got to come to this building right now. You got to come. You got to come. I was like, Marcus, calm down. What's going on? He's like, no, you got to come to the building right now. I said, you got an alarm? You have an alarm? You got trouble? You got fire? What? Come on, calm down. Tell me what's going on. He's, I can't tell you what's going on. You got to come to the building. I was like, okay, are you safe? I'm safe. I'm okay. I got the other guys. You see, we had other security officers in other buildings, and we were all sitting on the front steps of the corporate building. Come as soon as you can. I have to explain and show you. I was like, okay, I'm getting dressed. He wouldn't tell me, but he was frantic. So I threw my clothes on, got in the maintenance truck, and it was probably 25 minutes, maybe a half an hour with no traffic from the building from where I lived. And I got up there and I pull into the front of the corporate building, and sure enough, all the security officers are sitting on the front steps. And Marcus looks like he's just frantic. I was like, Marcus, I actually grabbed him. I'm a pretty big guy myself, not as big as Marcus. I shook him by the shoulders. I was like, Marcus, get yourself together. Tell me what's going on. I said, you other guys, I said, appreciate you sitting with Marcus. And they're like, he's really shook up, Paul. You got to hear the story. I was like, okay, guys, I got it. Go back to your posts. So they went back to the other building. I said, Marcus, tell me what's going on here. He says, a ghost. I said, a ghost? He says, yeah, I ran into a ghost. I said, you ran into a ghost? He's like, yeah. Mm-hmm. He said, I ran into a ghost, and I don't know if I can ever go back in that building again, but I'll go with you, and I'll show you. So we walk in the corporate building and go through the lobby, and he heads down Secretary's Row. I said, what happened, Marcus? He said, well, I was doing my 1 o'clock round, top of the hour round. He said, nobody's in the building. Nobody's been in the building since about 10 p.m. He said, we had a couple Japanese executives working, and they did what they had to do, and they left around 10. He says, nobody signed in, nobody's badged in, nobody's card readed. I can see the cards, no alarms, nothing's going on. And I'm just doing my rounds. He said, I walked down Secretary's Row. He said, come on, follow me, I'll show you. So he's walking real gentle, and I'm walking behind him. I'm looking around, my head on a swivel. It's the middle of the night there, the early morning, whatever. And he goes down Secretary's Row, and he stops at the desk, a few feet away from the desk where Mr. Leeds' assistant would have sat. And Mr. Leeds' office is right there. Somebody else has the office now. He's been gone for a long time. And he said, Paulie, I'm coming down here. And I remember I looked at my watch, and I got the watchman's clock, and I'm going to punch the station at the end of Secretary's Row. And I look up, and there's an old guy sitting in the desk there. And he points to the desk where Mr. Leeds' assistant would have sat. I said, what do you mean there's an old guy? He says, I'm telling you, Paulie, there was an old guy sitting in the desk. And I looked at my clock, I glanced down, and then I looked back up, and he looked at me, and he smiled, and he nodded. And I looked back, I was like, checking the time to make a note that somebody was in the building. I thought to myself, geez, nobody punched the clock. Nobody hit the badge reader. Nobody signed in. Nobody came through the lobby. Where'd this guy come from? And then I look up, and he's gone. I said, what do you mean he's gone? He walked away? He said, no, he didn't walk away. He didn't even exist. He was there. I looked down for a second. I looked up, and he's gone. There's nobody there. Nobody walked away. Nobody passed me. This old guy is gone. And Marcus is there's sweat coming down his face, and his eyeballs are bugging out. And I was like, oh my gosh. I said, okay, Marcus, just think. I said, describe the guy to me. He's always an old guy, handsome, kind of older guy, distinguished. He said he had a lot of white hair, but it was combed kind of neat. I said, Marcus, did the gentleman have a tweed jacket on and a black tie? He says, yeah, Paulie, he did. He said, how do you know that? Do you know the guy? I said, well, yeah, I think I did. He said, you did? I said, well, I think it's Mr. Leeds. But the problem is, Mr. Leeds been dead for about 5 years. That was it. Marcus spun around, sprinted down Secretary's Row. He gathered his stuff, and I'm running behind him. I was like, Marcus, it's okay. It's okay. He says, it's not okay. It's not okay. He said, Paulie, you're a great guy. I love this job. I need the extra money, but I'm done. Put me in a different building. I'm never coming back here again. Put me in a different building or I quit. I'm done. I'm not staying tonight. I'm gone. And he gathered his stuff, his lunch pail, and boom, Marcus was gone. I had to put him in the warehouse down the street. And I sat the rest of the shift until the morning guy came to relieve me. I didn't see anything. I didn't encounter anything. Maybe Mr. Leeds, of course, he knew me. Maybe he's like, oh, well, Paulie's here now. Everything's okay. I have no idea. But I have to admit, I walked a little gingerly when I got down that part of Secretary's Row. And once in a while, I have no explanation. I have no reason not to believe Marcus. He never met the guy. He never knew Mr. Leeds, yet he described him perfectly. Energy. Buildings have people. They spend their lives there in work and hospitals. People die. People come, people go. It's life. And these buildings have all kinds of energy. We're energy. We have all kinds of electric in us. I forget how much electric we have. We're all energy. And our brains, our heart pulses, and there's energy in these buildings. Who's to say? You got electricity, you got HVAC, you got motors. Who's to say where all that energy goes? You spend so much time at your workplace or the place where you live. And a lot of buildings have pain. A lot of buildings have companies that go out of business, and we'll talk about that in part 2. And all these things. And once more, I have no explanation. I keep an open mind. So there we go. There's part 1 of these spooky stories and spooky season. And I hope you enjoyed them. And it was a blast. And I really, really had fun doing it. And we'll dig up more stories. And thanks for tuning in. Hey, what do I know about ghosts and goblins and things that go bump in the night? I'm just a guy from Patterson, New Jersey. Hey, please be kind, be gentle. Be very tolerant. Remember, kindness is for free. Spread it around as much as you can. It can only make this world a better place. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye bye for now. All right, let's get you out of here now. That's enough. Let's go home. Yeah, no more spooky stories. Bye bye for now. Get out of here.